go through a process of saying which parts of the system they're willing to accept a bigger risk in, and where the supplier can say, oh, yes, all right, we won't spend so much time looking at that one, but if we see a threat attacking one of your more critical systems, where we know your risk appetite is low, then those are the ones we'll spend all our time and effort on. In government circles, where I do quite a lot of work myself, the actual underlying methodology, now I've not got time for methodology, they don't take long, do they? Looks something like this. You list the kind of threat actors in the system, people who are working in the system, the call centres, the administrators and so on. And for each of these you write down what kind of security clearance they've got. Basic level of security clearance, higher level of security clearance for some of the people, and obviously none for the customers. You try and assign the numbers as to what kind of capability they've got. Obviously system administrators, for example, have got rather a high capability. They're very good at breaking into systems. On the other hand, they've got rather low motivation. They get paid to keep them secure, not to break into them. And this one here, deterrence. Is there a legal framework which decreases the chance that you're actually going to attack a system? And quite clearly, if you're a foreign government, well, of course, if you don't have security clearance, you've got enormous capability, your motivation is very high, and nothing's going to stop you. So foreign intelligence services are clearly going to make those threat profiles very much higher. But it's only by listing all of these cases one by one and going through the scenarios will you actually get a sensible kind of risk assessment. And at the end of this, you'll get a kind of prioritised risk calculation, which says that the customers, members of the public, acting under the influence, bribery, corruption, whatever, of the Foreign Intelligence Service, they mount a network attack, maybe by downloading a Dooku worm or something like this, and they will attack your customer management system and your enterprise service bus. This is because we put these things into the front of the system for this scenario. Basically, all it's doing is taking all the possible combinations, and it's no surprise that the one that comes out with the medium to high risk area is the one which is the combination of the uncleared people influenced by the people who've got the most resources. You might say, well, that's so obvious, why did you bother? The advantage is that you can now go through all of the other, say, 30 scenarios, and you can say why they're a low risk and how much money you're spending on resourcing the process of decreasing or managing the risk in those areas. And you can try and highlight the areas which are in fact the ones where most of the critical data is, where if you can put an extra message on that bus, it will actually do something critical. Rather than just interfere with the system, it will actually disrupt your power supply, send the wrong drugs to the wrong company, stop the trains working or something. Compliance is a bit like more of a lottery kind of game, I suppose. When you're doing compliance, you have to take into account all the possible legal frameworks, the Sarbanes-Oxley framework. Any recognition out there of Sarbanes-Oxley?
Yes.
And a number of other, I could go on across the board several times. And for each of those, I can look at different parts of the system, install and test application software and infrastructure is critical to Sarbanes-Oxley. But currently the Graham-Leach-Billy Act in the States says nothing about that particular area. I mean, in some sense this doesn't particularly matter, because as a reputable supplier, we just say, well, we'll adopt best practice. In fact, that wipes out more or less all of those in one go. But then the intelligent customer comes back and says, oh yes, but did you know that we're in the health business, and therefore the HIPAA, health insurance, and prompt from somebody. Does anyone know what HIPAA stands for? Can we have a quick Google to find out what HIPAA stands for? But health insurance in some states is a very critical area. People sue each other a lot of the time, and therefore some extra compliance rules needed to be abided by. And so obviously if you're supplying a security system which is in that area, then you need to know, again, from from an intelligent customer exactly what they expected. And compliance, well, any reasonable supplier will say, well, we collected all the logs, we checked all the data flows, we checked configuration, we reduced 1.5 billion events progressively down to the ones which were the prioritised events which you want to know about, and then we went through the threat evaluation process and we reported back through the structure which was the government structure which you told us to use. I mean, there's some very clever software down the bottom here to actually do event correlation, to look at events which are spread out over time, TCP packets which are cut up into little bits so that you can disguise them, and as I say, exfiltration processes which in fact may occur over a matter of years rather than just hours. And so clearly, looking at this from a possibility of detection problem, you clearly want to go to a supplier who's got some decent software and doesn't worry about the things you don't need to know about, but does in fact look long term. So the sort of summary here is that we need intelligent customers, intelligent, reasonable suppliers, and that gives you security. I mean, it's such a kind of trite answer in some sense. You might as well say, well, why have I come to a lecture on this? The trouble is, people who leave these kind of lectures turn into people like me who are running the place, sort of actually buying or delivering computer systems, and we get tied up with the actual process of doing it. And we forget to say, yes, let's go back to first principles. Let's take the COVID rule book out again. Let's rewrite how we're doing this and do it properly. So, we just kind of stick to the nice algorithms and we won't worry about how much it costs until we've actually sorted out precisely what the customer wanted and precisely what we were going to deliver. And on that kind of happy note, as it were, you can stop recording me and I'll sit back and ask the questions. Thank you very much for listening. I'll try answering questions on most things, particularly security. Anyone got some interesting ideas? Yes, there's one back there.
I have two questions.
Yes?
You talked about the COVID framework. Were you talking in reference to IBM or generally? Because I know there's ITIL and there's ISO 27001. So when I talked about it, were you saying what IBM uses or what is generally used?
A little of both. IBM has decided that we didn't have a good framework, or that we had one which was difficult to explain to customers, and therefore we agreed that we would adopt the COVID framework. And then customers said, well, actually, we would like you to use ISO 27000. And then the Ministry of Defence said, we'd like you to use the Security Policy Framework. And we said, well, actually, all of those frameworks can be merged into COVID. And so there's mappings between the various frameworks. It's quite an interesting management science exercise, again, to say which framework is the most comprehensive and to minimise the amount of overlap. And to make it clear exactly what you're doing. So from IBM's perspective, we like COVID because it's not an IT framework so much as a management framework. But I can understand that in many areas the customer says, well, we're an IT shop, we'd like you to tell us much more detail about the IT. But COVID is a good framework to use.
The second one, what motivates the level of risk appetite and organization of industry is willing to have or have?
Well, we asked the Home Office what their risk appetite was, and they said it's very low. We said, okay, so what do you mean it's very low? They said, well, we don't like risks, particularly financial risks. It's kind of a naive response. So we said, well, how about if we went through these scenarios and you can kind of stop us every time the risk looks too high. If we come out here with something that says medium high, and that means you will lose this much data probably from your visa system, from your fingerprint database system, and that's the kind of threat which we believe is a credible threat to the system. And you say, well, yes, we'd like to spend more money on decreasing that risk, or we'd like to employ more people, more intelligent people, better software to decrease that risk. But there is no answer. You can't just give an answer saying, I've got a low risk appetite. You might have a low risk tolerance temporarily. You might say, well, the system's going to be live for 10 minutes while we do some testing. It won't have real data in it. We have a low, our tolerance for risk during that just window of testing is actually quite high. You go ahead and, without some of the controls in place. But for general purpose production system, the risk on the passwords being broken into is this size, and so we'd like to, our risk appetite in that area is quite low. The risk of someone finding the certificate authority key, which allows you to mimic the software which is allowed onto the desktops, that's so critical to the system that our risk appetite there is very, very, very low. Don't lose the keys to the CA system. You have to actually break it all up into bits. There's no short answer to that one, and it's surprising that the governments haven't got a document that actually sets out risk appetite. But and in fact, it's now a mandatory requirement. If you look through the security policy framework from the government, go to the Cabinet Office site and look for SPF, mandatory